if you were to commit yourself to spending a week, when the opportunity arises to ask people who they think Jesus is, what do you think they would say? If you were to ask people around Mossvale, who is Jesus? What would they say? If you were to ask your family or friends, who is Jesus? What would they say? If someone were to ask you, flip it over, what would you say? Monday, we thought about Jesus being dishonoured in his hometown because those who knew him had hardened their hearts to the possibility that Jesus was the Christ, the Son of God. Today, having taken his disciples to a remote place, Jesus provides an answer to the question, who is Jesus? And so we'll pick up the narrative with the disciples having returned back to Jesus after he sent them out throughout the surrounding kind of villages around Nazareth. And we know from last week that they'd been healing people and casting out demons and preaching. And so presumably many people have been coming to faith, because of the power that Jesus had given them. And as a result of this, what seems to have happened is Herod, who is the ruler of the region, he's heard about them, and there's a discussion starting to take place among the different people in the region as to who is Jesus, who is this man? And so we pick it up in verse 32 of chapter 6. Jesus went away in his boat with his disciples to a remote place. But many saw them leaving and recognized them, and they ran on foot from all the towns and arrived ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd and had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Then he began to teach them many things. Okay, so you need to kind of picture that Jesus looks at the crowd and he sees men, women and children who are lost and in need of someone to lead them and direct them. And not just on that day, of course, but throughout their whole life. They are sheep in need of a shepherd, and Jesus is that shepherd. Verse 35 of chapter 6. When it grew late, his disciples approached him and said, "This place is deserted and it is already late. Send them away so they can go into the surrounding countryside and villages to buy themselves something to eat." "You give them something to eat," Jesus responded. They said to him, "Should we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat?" He asked them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Jesus then takes the 5 loaves and the 2 fish and he feeds 5,000 men. Now imagine that there are many women and children as well. I don't know how he did it. Did he simply speak and the basket's filled with bread and fish, and then every time someone took a piece out, the basket didn't empty? Did Jesus simply keep breaking the bread and distribute the fish, and the disciples kept coming back with baskets and Jesus kept filling them? Well, we're not really told how Jesus multiplied the bread and the fish. But what we are told is that everyone who ate was satisfied, and after everyone finished, there were 12 baskets full of bread and fish left over. Now, there's a lot we could say about this, but what I want you to notice is that what we're seeing here is a demonstration of Jesus' power and authority over the material world. Okay, power that is not unlike God providing manna every day for 40 years to those who wandered through the wilderness from Egypt to Israel. Jesus does what God did, and in doing so demonstrates that he is God. And Jesus is the Son of God who not only provides food for 5,000 plus, but he declares himself to be the shepherd who ultimately provides his people with much more than simply lunch for a day. Okay, Jesus is the good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep, and because of Jesus, we have eternal life. And so friends, with that in mind, why don't you take a minute to pray and thank God for Jesus, and then spend another minute considering who you can speak to this week and ask them who they think Jesus is. We know, but do they know?